The good news is that no matter what, people need to buy and sell homes, and their lives change. Ultimately, what we are is we're guides during enormous change in people's lives, and so changes still occur. And what we're seeing is that we are up year over year. That there is more activity in many marketplaces. If you look at the Cape, there's enormous change in the activity. If you look at the high end market, smart money's been moving at the beginning of the year. How that's going to move going forward remains to be seen, but I am cautiously optimistic.
Hey, Colleen.
Well, hello. How are
Long
you?
time no talk. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
I don't think you need an introduction, but Colleen Barry is the CEO of Gibson Sotheby's International Realty, and she's joined us on Realty every couple of weeks.
Mhm.
We're actually very overdue for a catch up.
Mhm.
And I know you have had a lot of recent, just reporter interviews, things like that, that
Yeah.
you've talked about the uncertainty in the market, and you have a very good way of twisting things for the positive in a truly positive way. And I have loved everything you've been putting out and talking about just about the opportunity we can find in this uncertain market that we're in right now.
Mhm.
So that was the topic I was hoping to dive into today, if you're open to it.
Oh, absolutely. We'll talk about whatever you'd like.
So from your perspective, what
Mhm.
were the biggest challenges and lessons that emerged if we're looking back here from the just the whirlwind of 2024?
Well, 2024 was pretty challenging. I mean, there were a lot of headwinds for real estate companies and real estate agents and for clients too. I mean, what we were looking at really was the continued challenge of the higher interest rates, which, historically, when you look at them, they're not that high. They're around the average. But in the wake of people get readily getting mortgages in the threes, to suddenly see the sevens was a big challenge, and it shifted affordability for those folks. So, that was one of the challenges. That also created a bit of a logjam for sellers as well, because what was going on is they're looking for a place to buy, and they're looking at their current 3% mortgage interest rate and looking at potentially buying at a seven and thinking, we don't know, we want to bridge that. So we saw some of that. And then you add to those challenges in the marketplace an election year, which was, it tends to be a little bit of a challenge. Historically, it doesn't mean on balance that we sell fewer homes, but what it does do is it shifts the cadence of the market. So the market tends to be front loaded in those years and tends to be slower in the second half of the year as people are waiting to see what happens. And then, of course, in the midst of all of that, we had a lawsuit settlement that occurred, and that was the one that involved the National Association of Realtors. And there was a shift to how real estate agents and companies were operating their businesses, with the goal that was intended of giving more transparency to consumers, really, so that each person understood who they were paying and what they were paying them right up front. So, but any change that happens, as we all know, even if it's change we want, it's challenging to go through. So when it was a change that people weren't really fully understanding in advance, it made it hard on them. That's why we spent literally years preparing for
I
it.
know.
So when it
I
happened, we
know.
were ready to go.
We've talked about that. Like it wasn't a surprise. And the nice thing really that we continue to talk about is that I feel like really lit the fire in 2024 was this is going to be a professional's game at this point.
Yep. Yeah.
The expertise matters piece, like it
Yeah.
really proved true in 2024. And I think we're expecting that to just continue. And honestly, the bar needs to
Absolutely.
continue to raise. You can't be part-time, you can't be dipping your toe. And the people who would maybe have given someone an opportunity that was maybe a relative or something like that,
Yep.
was not in this full time. It's just not even an option anymore. You really have to know what you're doing.
Agreed. I mean, it's whenever there are challenges, then expertise, experience, knowledge, all of those things become even more important. And so navigating all of the change, navigating through challenging market circumstances, we really saw that companies who were prepared and agents who were prepared and were ready to go with their knowledge and their expertise and ready to guide people, they tended to do better on balance.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess now pivoting to looking forward, where we just sort of alluded to, but
Mhm.
you recently contributed to a risk media story that
Mhm.
I felt like hinted at cautious optimism.
Yeah.
What do you think specifically Greater Boston? What are we looking at ahead here for the rest of the year?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We were thinking initially toward the end of last year that interest rates would come down a little bit more, and that would sort of loosen that logjam for sellers and also get energy behind the buyers. And that really hasn't happened the way we were hoping to. And some of that is due to the economic and trade policy that our current administration is moving forward with. But the good news is that no matter what, people need to buy and sell homes, and their lives change. Ultimately, what we are is we're guides during enormous change in people's lives, and so changes still occur. And what we're seeing is that we are up year over year, that there is more activity in many marketplaces. If you look at the Cape, there's enormous change in the activity. If you look at the high end market, smart money's been moving at the beginning of the year. How that's going to move going forward remains to be seen, but I am cautiously optimistic. I think there are a few things that could happen here that might shift things. One, we're very fortunate in our marketplace to be in a very resilient economy as opposed to other parts of the country. So whenever we have had economic downturns and recessions, we tend to do much better than the rest of the country. So that's one key point. Another point is that if there is a shift in terms of the economic strength and the momentum that the country sees, we will likely actually see a shift toward lower mortgage interest rates because they are really geared toward what's happening with the long bond, the 10-year treasury note. So I think, there's a distinct possibility that could happen as well. In either case, again, we're poised to do very well here. If you look at any kind of market shifts in the past, it's interesting because real estate tends to do well, with the exception of the 2008 mortgage crisis, which was a real estate based economic crisis. So, of course, real estate had challenges, but typically recessions or any kind of market slowdown actually tends to do well for real estate. Real estate tends to perform well. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, actually. But it requires having a really clear understanding of what's going on in the marketplace and having a steady hand in those times when things don't seem quite so simple.
Yeah, I love that. And all in all, like everything you went through, like inventory remains that it remains that we don't have a lot of inventory. And I
That's
think
right.
that's something that it's hard for people to wrap their minds around. Like they're like, what
Mhm.
recession? Like, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, the inventory still isn't there, right? The supply
In
is
our marketplace.
demand in our marketplace,
That's
which
right.
definitely does have an impact. What are you suggesting people do to, have their clients succeed in such tight inventory right now?
Well, I think, it depends on if you're guiding sellers or you're guiding buyers. Obviously, sellers, it's a pretty simple story. You want to get the property prepared very well because you have one shot at getting the most for your property. And then you want to get it out to the widest possible group. That's hugely important. As a matter of fact, there was a recent shift in Zillow's policy that if a company is using a non-consumer facing way to market their own listings, but privately. In other words, having a private portal but it's geared toward consumers. You kind of have to like log in in order to be able to search that inventory. That if they want to be able to go on the market with Zillow, they're not going to be able to. And what's interesting is there are some private portals out there run by some companies right now, and they're saying that more than 90% of them eventually go on the market. So where that impacts a seller is that if they've opted to go with one of those private portals and then they need to go on the market, they may not get the benefit of Zillow, which Zillow, as much as we've kind of belabored the benefits and the challenges within the industry, ultimately it is the largest consumer portal available. So it's very powerful in terms of sellers. So I mean, there are lots of things to talk about with sellers to position them so that they can do the best they can in a marketplace that's actually geared toward their home, which is great. From a buyer standpoint, preparation is huge. And it's what we've seen is that buyers, who were kind of concerned or nervous about the market because of the lack of inventory, the reality is that they're able to find homes. It's just a matter of being prepared so that you can get in there early, you can get the best well-crafted offer that really emphasizes the priorities of the seller, because that is how they're going to purchase or to come to terms, is if they're really meeting the seller's needs. So there's a way to meet both parties' needs. You just have to be really prepared and educated and ready for it. And that's what we've seen happen, that ultimately, I remember the line that it was Jeff Wilson, I think, from TTR Sotheby's said at one of our big events that we had. And he said, we had clients, buyers who came to him and said, we're so worried about the lack of inventory in the market, and he said, well, how many homes do you plan to buy? And they said, one. He said, oh, we can get that done. So,
Oh, that's funny.
so I
It's
think,
good
yeah,
perspective.
it really is. It's absolutely possible. It's just that we're not seeing the amount of inventory that we would see in the past. It's not a balanced market, but that just means you need to be better prepared, better guided. Again, back to what you said earlier, in times like this where there are challenges, it's more important that you have an expert who's guiding you through the process. And that way you're ready to go. When you find the right home, you can pull the trigger. So
I love that. Anything specific as we get deeper into 2025? Any trends or opportunities you're keeping a close eye on right now?
absolutely. I think right now, because of how challenging it is, it's even more important rather, for companies and leadership of companies to do what they can to try to support agents and their clients. So that could be through tools, it could be through training, it might be through networking and other methodologies so that they can be trading best practices with other professionals in the marketplaces. Sometimes it's going to be giving them a sense of what's happening, like an inside track. I know that you and I have a plan to really take advantage of that for our agents. So I think there are a lot of things that companies and leadership can do so that they can better support their agents, so that they're feeling more empowered to be able to even help their clients. The more empowered our agents are, the more empowered their clients are.
Right.
So ultimately, that's what I see our job as being over the course of this year, is really doing the best we can to create a really strong, comprehensive service and tech tools platform for our agents so that they're prepared.
I love that. And prepared and then perspective is really, what it is for us.
Yeah.
We just had our whole company-wide meeting and I felt like the whole thing was about that. You can't just say like, there are a lot of people I feel like they're like, oh, just give them the right mindset, it'll work out. It's like, well, we can't
Right.
just like hope that it works out, right? We have to
No.
be prepared. We have to have some sort of a blueprint, but the perspective then matters, because you can have the best blueprint in the world, but like if your perspective is off, and so much of our company-wide meeting was around that, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of people came to me after, they're like, it was just the perspective I needed, like
Good.
I needed
Yeah.
that little bit of
Yeah.
so it is, that is, I feel like, what our main focus is right now. It's like it's
Mhm.
not as hard to do the blueprint, right? It takes some work, but it's like getting everybody into that mindset of
Yeah.
not keying on the news, right? And finding that opportunity that we keep
Yes.
talking about, and
Yeah.
just figuring out how, like you said, if you want one house, let's find the one house. Let's not focus on,
That's right.
100 of them. And so I
Yeah,
think
that
we're right.
that's an opportunity mindset. It's the opposite of the scarcity mindset.
Right,
And it's so easy. The scarcity mindset, by the way, sells so well on the news.
right.
There's not going to be enough. We're not going to have enough time. There's not enough money. There's not enough opportunity. And what you find is when you work with people who have been at this for a long time, they've had success in the most challenging years. How is that possible? Well, because there's opportunity. They just are trained to see it. And so I
Yes,
think I think you're absolutely right. The perspective is going to be huge.
I love it. Well, thanks for jumping on with me today.
Thank you.
I will probably talk to you very soon.
I'm sure we will.